Hi, I'm Michael P. Coleman, Content Director for Brother Be Well. Thanking you for checking out this Parents and Caregiver series brought to you by Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative. Hi, I'm Michael P. Coleman, Content Director for Brother Be Well. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, of 1996 is a federal law that requires the creation of national standards to protect sensitive patient information from being disclosed without the patient's consent or knowledge. It's important to know all about that law and those resulting standards prior to someone in your family experiencing a mental health emergency or a medical emergency or event of any type or severity. During today's conversation, we're going to walk through HIPAA and all of those resulting standards, and we'll touch on a number of common HIPAA violations. You may have heard of those. We're going to have that conversation with one of my favorite conversation partners, Dr. Carlos Martinez. He's an associate marriage and family therapist with HearU.org. We call him Dr. Carlos or Dr. C. Dr. C, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. It's great seeing you. You're looking very happy and very, very relaxed, by the way.
Well, it's an effort. It's because of people like you that I've managed to learn how to do that at the end of the day. So thank you, sir. We're talking about HIPAA, so just a bit of a disclaimer. We're not presenting legal advice at all. We're providing a little bit of information. And if you want specific legal advice, we'd advise you to check in with an attorney on that. So let's get started with these questions, if you don't mind. Some of the parents, Dr. C, that are on the Brother Be Well platform weren't even around in 1996. And I say that with the biggest of sighs. But because we got some young parents on the platform, would you mind explaining HIPAA and its origin to the Brother Be Well family? And specifically tell us why it was so important that HIPAA be established.
Yeah, sure. So 1996, I was 17, I think, maybe a junior or senior in high school. I'll leave that there, though. So HIPAA 1996, originally when it was created, when it was passed, it was basically set up for people who are transitioning from different jobs. So you go from a different job with one health insurance carrier and you're going from another job with a different health insurance carrier. You have information in one agency and you're trying to get it over to another agency. So if you're familiar, transferring over water from one cup to another, you're going to lose things in the process. Things are going to spill everywhere. So HIPAA originally was created to kind of streamline that process, prevent waste, prevent fraud, and make things easier for us, the consumer. And so with that, after years later, it kind of morphed into different things, trying to keep up with the digital age when it came to data protection, information, things like that. So that's basically HIPAA in a nutshell. Started off to help us carry information forward different places, and now it's kind of morphed into still that, but now all this data and personal information stuff.
Oh, and that's the stuff we typically hear about in the media, HIPAA violations
Right?
and stuff like that. And we'll get into some of those violations in a sec. By the way, sir, I that wasn't lost on me. You were 17 and you said you'll leave it right there. I'm going to leave it right there too. I'm not even going to talk about how old I was in 1996. Let's talk about parents and caregivers, Dr. Carlos, and specifically, what do they need to know about HIPAA? And does it apply to mental health? Does HIPAA apply to mental health as well?
Yeah. Okay. So HIPAA does apply to mental health, mental and medical information. So now, as far as parents and caregivers are concerned, if you have someone who has chronic mental health issues, if you're caring for someone, you love someone who has chronic medical issues, cognitive issues, HIPAA is going to be there. And HIPAA can be a barrier. The reason why HIPAA can be a barrier or is a barrier is because a lot of times we just don't know. We don't know a lot. We don't know anything about it. And I'll be honest with you, even caregivers can be a little healthcare providers can be confused with it as well too. That's due in part to training, which we'll talk about later. So as far as parents and caregivers are concerned, yes, it does apply to mental health, and understanding HIPAA can help you. Having a better understanding of HIPAA can help you navigate that system, that medical or mental health system better. And the best way to do that is do your research. do your research with it, ask for help. National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, big advocates, and they have a wealth of information on their website, NAMI.org.
NAMI.org, really appreciate that. And we're going to mention them a little bit later as well, Dr. Carlos, but appreciate that. There is a lot of information out there. And if I recall, there's a lot of misinformation. I think the media
Yes.
largely kind of misrepresents some of those HIPAA challenges. And I think that's where some of that confusion comes from. So I appreciate you taking time out to kind of help us set the record straight. I understand, sir, that there are four main purposes associated with HIPAA. If I'm right about that, can you tell us what they are?
Yeah, and those four main purposes basically have to do with the different types of data. So the first one has to do with privacy of our health data. The second one has to do with security of our data, health information. Third has to do with notifications. How are we notified, and how are other people notified? Other entities and concerned people notified with our data. And also now we have to deal with data breaches. So are we notified in a timely manner when our data is floating out in the ether? And patient rights over our own data. Are we able to look at our information? Are we not able? Can I make changes? Can I contest something? Those are all things that are covered under the four purposes of HIPAA.
I'm going to need to self-disclose here, Dr. Carlos, and tell you how old I was in 1996, because I got to do that to ask this next question. I don't recall. I was 31 or so. I don't recall data breaches being too terribly big then. In fact, I think that was the beginning of the internet, and we hadn't gotten into this realm we're in right now. You're right. Data breaches are everybody knows about them. We have a heightened awareness about those. So I'm wondering if that data breach component to HIPAA was always there. Were they kind of ahead of the curve? Do you know? Or was that added to the body of laws and standards later?
Right. I can't give you 100% answer on that as far as wasn't always there. What I do know about it, and I mentioned it earlier, it started off with the portability, because that's part of it, Health Information Portability Act, and I think I'm missing an A there somewhere. But taking that information over, and then as the data breaches became more pronounced, especially in the digital age, is when they had to put safeguards in place to go ahead and protect that data from the breaches and notifying us when it happens.
I got it. Really appreciate you helping us with that, Dr. Carlos.
Sure.
I'm curious now about HIPAA's privacy rule. Can you tell us what specifically is protected by HIPAA's privacy rule?
Yeah, sure. So one, medical information, right? Things like diagnosis, whether it's a mental health issue or a medical issue, schizophrenia on the mental health side, or my high cholesterol, right? Doctors and any caregiver, they can't give out that information, along personal identifiers, first name, last name, date of birth, height, weight, sex, right? Gender. And from what I remember is that there's about 18 different things, social security, address, things like that you can identify someone. Those are all protected under HIPAA.
Can you tell us what's then not protected by HIPAA? What's do we have to worry about that HIPAA doesn't cover?
Yeah, so when it comes to those 18 personal identifiers plus the mental health diagnosis, those and what's not covered. So you've got things. Well, I've got this. I'm not going to go ahead. I have this smart watch by a company that I bought it from. I'm not going to sell any brands here. But I track my heart rate, I track my activity level, and with that, it ties to my information. So technically, this is all health information that's going to the fruit company that manufactured this watch. So I'll leave it there. So with that being said, if there is a data breach, they're going to go ahead and notify me, but technically it's not covered under HIPAA because there's only certain entities that HIPAA applies to. and that's healthcare organizations or third-party agents that do like billing and things like that. And so we have health information, health records, and then also there's health information in things like our employee files, right? When you fill out an employee emergency card form, they may ask you things like, do you have any type of issue that we need to worry about or concerned with? And school records and things of that nature. Those are different. There are different federal rules that are in place to manage those.
You always, Dr. Carlos, come up with something that I hadn't thought about, because you and I both have that same fruit-related wearable that we wear. That was pretty funny, by the way. I would think that company really had to work hard to make sure if HIPAA wasn't protecting folks or protecting folks from a breach there within that health data, they must have really had to take some serious steps before they added that health component to those devices. And I know I don't know what you know about it. Yeah.
Well, it's probably going to be all in those the fine print that I don't know about you, but me, I'm just scrolling and pushing.
Yeah, me too. I might go back and look at that though and see about that. I had made that connection before. So that's
let me know what you find.
I sure will. I sure will. Okay. Gets me to this next question, Dr. Carlos. When we're talking about who's got that confidential health information, so a family member, friend, a neighbor disclosing health information about one of your children, or even one of the neighbor's kids, that might be unethical. In my mind, it certainly would be.
I hear you. Yeah.
You hear me? But from what you say, that's not a HIPAA violation.
No, it's not. Unethical, bad form. It's just one of those things where sometimes you want to vent, right? Sometimes you want to vent and just you're a parent, you want to talk to family and friends, and you're like, oh my kid, I love my kid so much, but what's going on with this? Whether it's a medical issue or behavior issue or mental health issue, right? It's I wouldn't even know if it would be considered unethical. And when I think of ethics, I think of rules, regulations, organizations, and for me, it's just bad form, bad taste. But as far as a family member violating, no, they can't. The only way that a family member can violate HIPAA is if they illegally obtain information, right? They bribe someone at a mental health center or a medical center to make photocopies of the records or something like that, where they're not allowed to have it. Those can be violations. Along the lines of what you said, kind of remind me of being just unethical. And this will go into later conversation, stigma. If you're sitting here sharing information, sensitive information about son's diagnosis or daughter's diagnosis or cousin who has severe mental illness issues, it can lead into some stigmatizing thoughts and conversations with the person you're sharing that information to. I see it as being both good and bad, because maybe that information that you're sharing, that person can help you, but it can also flip and do a 180, and they can stigmatize it, and your loved one can be the black sheep of the family. So it's tough to balance, tough to balance, tough to navigate. There's ways around things to get information, but basically it boils down to the right to know versus the need to know. It's kind of a rule of thumb I kind of live by. Do I have the right to know this information or share it, or do I need to know the information, or do I need to share it?
That's really an important distinction. I was in a conversation just a week or so ago, and I had already prepared for this conversation about HIPAA, so it was top of mind for me. And I had a little information about a diagnosis for someone who's engaging on the Brother Be Well platform, and I was really reticent about sharing it. And without even knowing that advice from you, Dr. Carlos, I thought, does this person really need to know that, or do they just need to know this? I don't even want to get too deeply into it right now, but I thought, do they really need to know what the diagnosis is, or do they just need to know that they should, slow down a little bit in communicating and really give the person time? That's the kind of issue I was dealing with.